4 distinguished service orders, dozens of Axis aircraft destroyed, and yet Paddy Mayne was denied the Victoria Cross. For decades, the explanation was his volatile personality, but one phrase, buried in the recommendation file, points to something else entirely. In the summer of 1941, a new kind of unit took shape in the Western Desert. The Special Air Service, or SAS, began as a small band of volunteers led by David Sterling, but it was Blair Paddy Mayne who would become its most formidable field commander. Mayne, a former solicitor from Newtown Ards, joined the original SAS detachment and quickly set himself apart. Unlike most officers, he insisted on leading from the front, often taking the first jeep into enemy airfields or personally laying explosives under Axis aircraft. The SAS's early doctrine relied on speed, surprise, and audacity. In December 1941, Mayne led a raid on the Wadi Tamer airfield in Libya, destroying enemy planes and fuel stores in a single night. The official war diary entry for that operation credits Mayne's party with blowing up multiple aircraft and escaping before German reinforcements could respond. Over the next 2 years, Mayne's squadrons struck airfields at Benghazi, Tobruk, and beyond, crippling the Luftwaffe's desert operations. Each raid carried enormous risk, but the results were undeniable. Dozens of Axis aircraft destroyed, supply lines disrupted, and enemy morale shaken. For these actions, Mayne received 4 distinguished service orders, a record almost unmatched in British military history. The London Gazette citations describe courage, determination, and superb leadership, and note that Mayne's personal example inspired his men to follow him into the most dangerous situations. By 1943, he was not only a legend within the SAS, but also a symbol of what special operations could achieve. The scale and frequency of his frontline exploits established a clear foundation for later recommendations for the highest honors. Stories of Paddy Mayne's explosive temper and hard drinking have long shaped his public image. Anecdotes circulate about bar fights, insubordination, and a disregard for military protocol, tales that grew louder as the decades passed. In the years after the war, gossip among veterans and speculative press reports began to suggest that Mayne's unruly behavior, rather than any question of bravery, cost him the Victoria Cross. This narrative gained new momentum with the BBC 2022 drama series Rogue Heroes, which portrayed Mayne as a brooding, unpredictable figure, equal parts hero and liability. The series, broadcast on October 29th, leaned heavily on scenes of late-night drinking and violent outbursts, reinforcing the idea that officialdom recoiled from his wildness. Such portrayals have left a deep mark on public memory. The legend of drinking and brawling is now so entrenched that it often stands as the default explanation for the missing Victoria Cross. Archive interviews and online forums echo the belief that Mayne's reputation for insubordination made him an embarrassment to senior officers. Yet, these accounts rarely cite primary sources. Instead, they rely on hearsay, dramatization, and the repetition of familiar tropes. The BBC press materials for Rogue Heroes even stated outright that Mayne's conduct was often cited as the reason his Victoria Cross was never awarded, a claim repeated in countless articles and documentaries since. This widely held belief sets the stage for a closer investigation. The question remains whether the volatile personality narrative stands up to scrutiny when weighed against archival records and the actual language of the Victoria Cross Charter. To understand why the highest honor eluded Mayne, it is necessary to move beyond legend and examine the original evidence. At dawn on April 4th, 1945, Mayne's squadron advanced toward Oldenburg under heavy German fire. The war diary records the first radio check at 6:12 in the morning, with Mayne giving orders from the front and confirming the integrity of his forward units. Within the hour, his men encountered a minefield and came under mortar attack near the Kronsort Bridge. Mayne led the effort to extract wounded Private Collins, personally carrying him to safety while coordinating stretcher teams under direct fire. As the morning wore on, he directed alternating fire teams, managed ammunition, and kept morale steady through a sustained exchange lasting nearly 2 hours. At 9:12 in the morning, a German tank threatened the advance. Mayne called for anti-tank support and ordered a direct assault, resulting in the destruction of the vehicle. He continued to oversee radio liaison with Canadian forces, relaying coordinates for artillery barrages as the fighting moved into the town's industrial quarter. By 2:05 in the afternoon, after 8 hours of continuous action, Mayne had led multiple forward movements, coordinated casualty evacuation, and secured the final objective. The surviving records and eyewitness accounts describe a day of relentless leadership, where acts of bravery were woven into every phase of the battle. The original Victoria Cross recommendation for Mayne survives in the War Office 373 file, its pages covered with official endorsements and handwritten marginalia. The document's narrative describes a series of actions at Oldenburg, repeated advances under fire, the rescue of wounded men, and coordination with Canadian forces. But in the margin, a senior official's annotation stands out, with initials and a date beside the phrase Victoria Cross, not warranted, recommend, distinguished service order, third bar. The reason given traces back to the wording of the royal warrant. The Victoria Cross requires a signal, act of valor. Here, the committee interpreted signal to mean a single, clearly defined moment, not a drawn-out period of leadership or repeated bravery. Damian Lewis's forensic analysis of the archive photos highlights this critical misreading. The paperwork shows how, by treating Mayne's multi-hour gallantry as lacking a pinpointed act, the recommendation was quietly downgraded. This administrative decision, captured in a few lines of marginal script, would shape Mayne's legacy for decades. In April 2025, the question of whether Mayne's Victoria Cross should be reconsidered reached the House of Commons. Hansard Records' Early Day Motion 1533, which called for a transparent, expert-led review of the 1945 recommendation. The Ministry of Defense responded by outlining the formal process. The Honours and Appointments Secretariat would convene an independent panel, examine new evidence, and report findings to Parliament. The policy, last updated in July 2024, specifies that a retrospective award is possible only if clear proof of procedural error or misinterpretation is found. This mechanism, now set in motion, places the final decision in the hands of historians, officials, and elected representatives. Whether this review will lead to a posthumous Victoria Cross remains uncertain, but the debate over Mayne's legacy continues to shape how Britain confronts its own military history. Today, official silence endures while new evidence challenges old assumptions. As Parliament debates historic injustices, Mayne's case asks who decides how exceptional courage is truly recognised. What would justice look like now?